From the Sarah Smiles Network, I'm Sarah Smiles, and this is the Consider the Source podcast, a show about women who've built ideas, movements, and careers by questioning the status quo and challenging the norms. Here's a new episode for you.
So it's come to be part of the regular routine.
Okay, well, good.
Amazing. Well, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell me a little bit more about your KG People consulting company and how you got involved with that.
Yeah, so my name's Katie, obviously. I've been working in HR for a really long time. And I say a really long time, but like 15 years. So for me, like my whole life. And yeah, I started in the government. I was a baby HR person, and I have grown up in HR. And a couple years ago, I ended up leaving the government and went into government contracting, but I am on the corporate side, so the company side.
Okay.
And I head up a people and culture team, and by team it's me. But I take care of all of HR. And then
Amazing.
About a year ago, I went into just some thinking of like, what else is there, right? What more can I do? And so my main job, my company that I work with, is a small business. And I always think, I came in 3 years ago and I'm fixing all these problems. If they had just started in the beginning, how different it would have been. And so during that thought process, it kind of sparked what if I just started my own business? I think there's always been a lot of uncertainty in the HR world and the government contracting and job market as a whole. But there was a period there where I was kind of like, what happens if I don't have this anymore?
Yeah.
And when that occurred, it was a matter of, well, fend for yourself. And how do you do that best? And in the thought process of that, I was like, start my own business? Sure. But what does that look like?
Yeah.
And so I sat on it and I was kind of like, well, do I really want to do that? Is it something that I wanted to really focus on? And then come around January, I was like, no, this is something that would be really cool.
Yeah.
And so I started KG People Consulting. And the goal or the idea of it is that it's there to help people from the ground up. I don't need to go in and try and fix problems per se.
Yeah.
But being there to help businesses who are just kind of starting and not knowing what they're doing. And helping from that people's side, because at the end of the day, the people are what's doing the work. And they're the ones bringing home the money for any business. And so part of that really kind of stuck to me as, how do you take care of your people, but also not overwhelm a president or a CEO of a company who has no idea what to do.
Yeah. And
so from that little piece, I thought, okay, well, I love doing HR, but HR is not the place that most people want to deal with, and they don't like to deal with HR. And so it all really spawned from this desire to try and get rid of the stigma of HR and helping and showing from that very ground level where HR can truly be for both business and the company, or business and the people.
No, I get what the company of the company, you know what I mean? Yeah, no, it makes so much sense. And I feel like I had a really good friend that was in HR that worked with me in a startup, and she was like, it's really difficult because even when you're off the clock and you're going to happy hour with your coworkers, it's like, well, she's here, so let's be on our best behavior. And there's never really a point in time where that gets switched off. And you always are just, she's in HR, she's gonna tattle on me, Katie's around, let's be cautious of what we're saying. So it becomes this really difficult position to be in terms of trying to relate to your coworkers and peers and trying to make connections and friends and really feeling isolated. And that's just something that I noticed on my end. It wasn't even something that she expressed to me. I was just like, damn, I feel bad for her. But there's 100%. Also, and so I would love to hear, like, is that an experience that is frequently seen across HR, or is it specific to certain sectors, or what?
So I think it's everywhere. Like I said, I started in the government. Government's huge, right? And so when I started, I was very entry level. I was right out of high school. And even from the very beginning. So for me, I was a technical assistant in HR. So doing like the processing and the transaction side. But the stigma of HR is always there for some reason. Well, and I can't even say for some reason, because like there's those moments of like, oh, I understand why people think this way. But it's very isolating. And so even in that big perspective, I was there for 12 years and I worked in very different capacities of HR, and all of the people that you're connected to at the end of the day are your other HR coworkers. Because they're the ones experiencing it too. And so when I left about 3 years ago, I thought, well, I'm stepping into something, I'll be by myself. And it almost heightened it so much more, because coming out of the government, you're stepping into a corporate world where it is very much the perception, no matter what industry you're in, that HR is there to only protect the business. And to some extent, that's true. But because of that, oftentimes, and I don't even know how many times it's happened, but it's, oh, well, the policy police are here, or the fun police. And I'm like, that's actually not who I am.
Hey guys, so I actually do enjoy having fun, believe it or not.
Right. And I think that's the hard part. And it's breaking down the stigma. And so when I started in my current company, I had this thought process of, okay, I'm walking into a team who is not used to HR for what it is. And so I personally hate the thought of coming in and having that perception of nobody can come and trust HR, nobody can come and talk to HR on a friend level. And that friend level is hard because, you know, at the end of the day, they're coworkers. But for me, it's like, I still want to build connection. And I'm a team of one. So most of my business, or most of my day-to-day work in that perspective, was with the CEO and the executive directors. And so from that perspective, it was, for me, it was, how do I break that barrier down for our employees? And so stepping into owning my own business was the same thought process. How do you break that down so that your employees aren't thinking, well, HR is coming in only to give these rules and regulations and stipulations that are so very rigid, but to help continue to build that connection as people. Because I think that's the thing that we miss so much, is we are all humans and we all have emotions and we can't get rid of them. And I think we always hear, well, HR is not your friend. And that's fine. Like, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. But I think it's really fun to break that barrier down and show, like, hey, there's a level of HR hat being on, but there's a friend hat. And so when that friend hat's on, that might disconnect us from being business, but it will help build back into the business and grow the trust of, hey, no, I'm actually having a problem where I need assistance on trying to just, how do I get a pay increase? Like using HR to using them to utilize your benefit is there. But I think we have had so many HR professionals for so long who either disconnected or caused damage to that. And we still see it to this day, but that's not everybody. And I think it's just making it known.
And I mean, going back to what you had initially said of HR is there to protect business, but at the end of the day, like, the people are the business. And so at what point are you protecting moreover the corporate entity than you are the individuals that work for that entity?
And so that's a great question, because it's a weird line, truly. I think the thought is business has to operate, and who's going to do that? But the number one thing I say to almost everybody I work with in my full-time job, in my consulting business, is I'm not going to be the one standing in court unless I'm called and I have to provide documentation. I'm not a lawyer. And so my guidance is based off of recommendations or the interpretations of policies and all of that. But I'm not going to go to be the person that is fighting against an employee for no reason.
Right.
I think there's a balance of how you handle if there's a situation, if there's, a disconnect between policies or actions or performance or whatever that is. It's a matter of reminding ourselves, hey, we're all human. We all make mistakes and no one person's right.
Right.
And I think that's been one of the biggest things is when I have conversations with CEOs and presidents, it's that you're a human just like the employee you're talking about.
Right.
And so being able to say you're going to have a potential where you're going to disagree, but it's about how you have the communication and how you have those conversations. Because again, people are at the middle of it and you don't know what they're all going through every single day. It would be impossible for us to know all of that.
Right. And so when I think of trying to relay information from the top down and conversely from the bottom up, like that is an exhausting role. And so when you see things of like presidents or CEOs mandating additional hours or higher percentage of workload or something that requires more work than what the workers are already giving, and then the workers are coming to you and they're like, what are we supposed to do with this new mandate? I'm already working overtime for free. I'm already doing this. Like, how do you mediate that? Because at the end of the day, the CEO is coming to you and telling you, we need this in order to prevent layoffs. We need this in order to keep afloat as a company.
So I think the biggest thing for me is the transparency. And I go into every conversation with any executive level that where's your level of transparency going to be? Because if you're one of the individuals that wants to say, this is what we're doing and never explain the why or what the outcome or goal is, then you're going to get that negative feedback. And that's just what it is. And I think there's always a balance, right? Some levels, some companies are going to say, yep, we're going to be fully transparent. We're going to put out all the information. We're going to tell them exactly how it is. And then there are others who are very much like, nope, we're only going to say this is what we're doing and this is how we're going to follow it. But for me personally, and my approach and what I would recommend for so many people in HR is playing both sides and making it known and saying, if we don't have whatever level of transparency we want to have, here's what might come from that. And then being able to back that with data. So the one thing I always say is data doesn't drive human culture. It doesn't at the end of the day. Feedback and all of that is what's going to come and drive the changes. But that's all human. Those are all emotions. Those are all people's thoughts. And so if you were saying we have to return to the office and everybody has to be in because we've seen the decrease in productivity, which I don't actually agree with. But being able to have something to stand on and say, like, this is why we're doing it before exactly what we're doing. And it's all about how you approach it and then balancing, because you're always going to have situations where employees are upset. There's never a perfect solution for every single person. It's impossible. And you will always receive some kind of negative feedback. But it's a matter of balancing. And the other piece of that is, are you willing to sink your company for the minority or the majority? There's got to be a balance in there of 50%. Well, 50% is not a great example, but 60% say this. We found a solution that meets in the middle to try and find that balance, and being able, again, to just stand on that and say, here's all of the information that backs it. I think for me in particular, I'm an oversharer when it comes to anything. I say that to everybody in a matter of, I rather be as transparent and as upfront with you as I'm going to be able to be. And then you can go and make the decisions on the back end on both sides, right? Working in a company as an employee as well as on the consulting. I think on the consulting side, it's always an interesting perspective because I'm giving suggestions. They're the ones making the decision. And so it's a matter of saying, from the experience, here's how other companies have done it, and here's what's worked well and what hasn't worked well. And at the end of the day, you're the one receiving the feedback. And so if you know your decision is going to upset 90% of your company. How do we phase it in a way that both is beneficial to the company and the employees so that they're not feeling like you've uprooted my entire career to make
Right.
a change that's only going to benefit the top 3% in a company?
Yeah. And I think that what you said about oversharing, I think one of my favorite CEOs that I've worked for so far, he was very well spoken and he had always said, there's no such thing as over communication. You can never over communicate with someone. And sure, you can overshare for sure, for sure. But over communication does not exist. Like someone cannot know enough about what you're doing, especially when you're working for them, when you're working with them, when you're doing work on their behalf. There is no such thing as over communication. And as long as they know the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, everything becomes that much easier and becomes that much more of a level of trust.
Absolutely. I think one of the greatest examples I can always provide is there are going to be times companies don't do as well as they did in previous years, and that's going to
Mm-hmm.
drive different cultural changes. And one of those things is like eventing. I always say, like, your morale and your employees and your culture isn't because you had a pizza party. It's not
Right.
because you took them out to do whatever it is that you want to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do center your culture on gathering and coming together and seeing each other and congregating together, then it's about how you approach it. And it's always one of those things where if you cut out all of your events and you
Mm-hmm.
don't say why, or you don't
Mm-hmm.
communicate why, that's a massive change for what you may have done for 6 years or whatever
Right.
that time frame looks like. And so how do you then properly communicate it and
Mm-hmm.
say, well, oh, we're not going to do the party or we're not going to do an event this
Right.
year, and then not say that it's because we're going to do a
Mm-hmm.
much larger scale because you guys asked for it. It's
Yeah.
always about how you communicate it and then actually saying it. And I think that's the other piece that a lot of times, not to blame one way or the other, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
CEOs think, oh, well, this is happening. I know it.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's going to communicate it.
Right.
But then it
And it
doesn't
never
get
does.
communicated. Yeah. Or it doesn't get communicated the way that they thought it would.
Right.
Especially the bigger the company, the lot bigger the hierarchy,
Mm-hmm.
leaving it up to others is going to cause this different connotation of how that information is passed down, and
Yeah.
definitely affects how that culture is being driven within the company. It's
Mm-hmm.
always going to go back to communicate. And I agree, over communicate is
Mm-hmm.
never going to harm you unless you're saying things that you can't, if you're making promises that you can't keep.
Right.
But then sticking to it and saying, this is what I'm going to do and
Mm-hmm.
how I want you to communicate it through.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like there are so many different sides of HR that require so much communication. And one of which is on the very early side of career in terms of the hiring process and the recruitment process. And I feel like, especially right now, with the job market where it's at, how often is the decision of if you're going to be hired or not made before the interview is even conducted?
That's a great thought process and question in it of itself, because it's hard. It's all so dependent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually don't consult on staffing in my business
Mm-hmm.
because I always make the joke that staffing was something I did so long ago and I didn't like it because it's sales for people.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think the truth of that is when you are building out a rec or putting something out there and it makes
Mm-hmm.
complete sense from a standpoint of strategic planning to
Mm-hmm.
pipeline and have ads out there and have positions out there, but not doing it in a manner of saying, oh, we're still going to go through the whole process, but never hire. And I think
Right.
what we are finding right now, especially in our current economic culture and our current situation, the market is so oversaturated with job applicants or job seekers
Mm-hmm.
that companies are trying to almost make people feel better that there are positions out there.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, they're not
Yeah.
ready. Or what we also find is a lot of positions are fake.
Mm.
LinkedIn, Indeed, they're building out job ads on purpose in conjunction with companies that overinflates what the market really is.
Mm.
And part of that comes from companies, and depending on the market, right, depending on the position, companies are taking a hit too. There's an
Yeah.
economic change, and while I guess most people would say we're not in a full recession, but as that recession does occur,
Right.
companies are also taking a hit because the demand is still there for employees on the current side. What I
Yeah.
have found from my standpoint is that a lot of companies, especially companies who do contracting to other work, they anticipate and they go forward and put positions out there and in order to prep, and then something on the back end happens, the contract's lost, the positions don't come through to that specific company,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's just the ghosting occurs versus
Yeah.
communicating what happened. And I
Yeah.
think there's always two ways to think about internal versus external hiring. I make a very good point to say if you know you're going to hire internally or you're going to promote somebody into the role, there's no reason to post that ad unless you're in a state that requires it. And
Right.
so, like in Colorado, if you are promoting within, there's still a level of you have to advertise a position if others could qualify for it. But
Right.
in that case, it's a matter of are you internally or externally advertising? Because it doesn't require you to say to the public, this is a
Mm-hmm.
position that we are making, but you
Yeah.
can do it internally. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really truly about how it goes back to that communication piece, how people are saying it, because we're in
Mm-hmm.
such a overwhelming time that most positions are receiving 100, 200, 300 applicants.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's that overwhelming feeling of, well, HR is the first people cut. And so there's a
Mm-hmm.
team of 2 doing all of the recruiting for a company of 600. And
Right.
now I've got 700 applicants. How do I then reach out and say it? But
Right.
then it gets lost. And I think it's
Yeah.
all built back into that individual side. There are people
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day doing this. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you know something happens, it's about telling them up front. But I think we get lost, and part of that negative connotation of HR goes back to we're not doing the best we can because
Mm-hmm.
we're also impacted, but it's
Yeah.
not an excuse to let go of how people are feeling. Because again,
Yeah.
we're right back to people at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I feel like the job that I'm in, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I have a weird realm of expertise in terms of the people that I work with and the people that I work for. And they tell me all the time, like, there's recruiters in their inbox talking to them all the time and looking for people to come to their jobs. And I work with contractors and they are telling me that they can't find people to do work. And so I see these things on LinkedIn where it's saying, the job market is terrible right now. I can't find a job. This is impossible. And then on the other hand, I have my contractors that are like, I can't find anybody to do this work. I can't find any operators that want to move to Colorado. I can't find. So, what is that? How is there
Yeah.
such a huge fall off between those two realms?
I think it's hard to say, right? I think that
Mm-hmm.
there are such different levels of what's happening. I think
Mm-hmm.
that depending on the position, depending on the company and the market or the area, there is a almost like a tunnel vision.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to look at these specific people. I'm going to only look for those people. Or on the flip side, well, there's a few different things. But on another side, ATS systems filter people out heavily.
Yeah.
And I know that there's that back and forth of are ATS systems really filtering out because of keyword searches? Are we really not getting to a good point because the systems and AI are controlling it? Yes and no. I think that there definitely are. And then I think that the other side of that is because of the way that we are politically and economically, there's a lot of ability to be picky on both sides. And so I always say we are not where we are when COVID was happening. It
Yeah.
was 100% a job seeker market. They were able to much quicker and much easier say, this is what I want. And companies would say, yep, okay, got it, we'll do it. Whereas now it's kind of flipped and companies have said, well, we're being told we can't hire certain individuals. There are more stipulations that we have to follow.
Mm-hmm.
They won't do it because of specific laws within the states, because every state has their own abilities and own laws. And so with that, it's making it harder for job seekers to get what they're asking for. And so companies have I won't say easier time, but a leg up in saying, nope, we can't afford that because we're also taking a loss on our side because of the contracts being paid less or whatever that looks like. And then the unfortunate part that I find to be so true is that it becomes this is what I'm thinking and seeing from the job seeker, and this is what I'm thinking and seeing from the company side. And they're almost fighting against each other without fighting against each other. And so the perceptions are so different. And I think we have come so far from before COVID, 2019 and before. I think we have come a lot farther in the job world to say, like, people know their worth, and that's okay. And it's great to be there. And I think that it's, again, going back to that balance of what is really able to be provided. I'll also say that there's a disconnect, and rightfully so. Everybody wants more money in their pocket. Fully agree. And then there's the aspect of what is the company actually providing and that they're defining as their compensation package. Are they paying the full benefits? Are they doing, what level of tuition assistance are they providing? All of these other things that do create a full compensation package, but they're not communicating it. And so there's such a big beast of what insurance looks like and what is all of these different factors that go in. What do those things look like? But we don't still to this day do a good job at communicating that. I think we're getting there. I think companies who are willing to have hard conversation are getting better at it. But at the end of the day, people still want money in their pocket. And it's a matter of that balance with the CEO saying, yeah, I'm willing to go this above or whatever that looks like. But that disconnect to me is really coming from the lack of communication, the lack of transparency on what we can and can't do internally and externally.
Yeah. And I've also worked in VC where a lot of people job hop from fund to fund, or they'll job hop just between startups and things of that nature. And I was in a discussion with a founder, and he wasn't able to pay one of his employees what his employee wanted. And employee ultimately left for a way higher pay. And the founder was like, I know that probably seemed like a good idea and that it was really satisfying, but he then was shortly fired thereafter because you're then chasing this level of pay that is way above what you're able to bat. And it's way above what you're actually able to provide to the company in terms of value. So where do you find that middle ground? How do you come to that consensus?
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting dynamic. Compensation, as hard of conversations as it can be with people, I love it. Not the conversations. I love the aspect of it, the philosophy of it. I think, again, to me, it goes back to what's the standard that a company is setting. Because I think the other piece of it, especially as more and more states take on pay transparency laws, is are people doing the same job at the same level with the same experience, but one just happened to ask for a higher pay? You say okay, and then this other individual just didn't ask. We are only giving what they're asking for. So that in and of itself is one side of things. But I think it's a matter of saying, here's how we view what career growth looks like. And it's one of those things that is very difficult if you've never done it. If you're a company that's been in place for 20 years and have never had career ladders or can show what career growth is and have a standard, it's a lot of work to do that. But it's really important because it helps show to the employee, okay, these are those boxes I need to check. And depending on the work that you're doing in contracting, a lot of that depends on where the work is and who the work is for. Those contracts and bids across any kind of contracting, bids are gone and approved or won based off of what rates are included. And
Mm-hmm.
so some companies will bid lower on purpose, and then it kind of messes up their employee side. And so
Yeah.
that has been a very common practice for so long. And as we continue to go forward, I think it's a matter of saying, okay, where are our current employees sitting? What
Mm-hmm.
are we expecting them to be at as part of
Mm-hmm.
that bid, and making sure that that's balanced. And
Yeah.
again, being able to justify it just on the flip side. When it comes to individuals who job hop, it is
Mm-hmm.
known, it's been proven that job hopping does get you more money, but at some point
Mm-hmm.
you do kind of hit a mark, especially depending on years of experience. And for
Right.
a really long time, there was this stigma of every time you leave a job, or you only on your resume, you may only have a year, 18 months, or whatever that looks like. The perception can be, concluded that you're doing it maybe for the wrong reasons, or that it's
Mm.
going to harm the company in the long run. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that you do what's best for you. And at the end of the day, what they did does not always reflect what their work ethic's going to be in a current job. There could
Mm-hmm.
be so many reasons that somebody leaves a position.
Right.
But it's always going to be really important to really think about how that next level is. And so one of the things that I always implement, and I kind of talk through this with my consulting business too, is that
Mm-hmm.
what level of acceptance do you want? I
Mm-hmm.
always tell everybody, if somebody says they're going to leave, money's usually not the number one indicator. If they are so
Mm-hmm.
far along, there are other issues, concerns, comments, whatever it may be. There are other things that are the foundation of somebody leaving, and the
Mm-hmm.
money is going to be the drive, the final factor kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if your company has morale or culture issues, then you have to focus on that first,
Mm-hmm.
and then be able to go backwards. And that just comes from having very open conversations. But when individuals don't want to talk to HR, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, when you are hopping and you get to that point of you may not be able to show that the next step or the next salary that you want, and may not be able to reach those salaries as you're interviewing, it just becomes very difficult. And so what I tell employees and managers and really everybody is, as much as I never want anybody to go out and take interviews and do jobs just to do them, but having the information in the background to show you or bring back to a company is really important.
Right.
Again, with the pay transparency laws, job ads now across many states just need to have a range. And so ranges
Mm-hmm.
can go from 70,000 to 200. And so
Yeah.
seekers can see that and say, okay, well, I can make 200,000. And what
Mm-hmm.
I try to remind employees is that the goal is to do everything based off of data to some extent when it comes to salaries.
Mm-hmm.
Companies should be sitting in a market, whatever that market looks like. If they want to sit within their market that with like company size and very similar work at the 50th percentile, then you might have a
Mm-hmm.
better chance of losing people. But if you sit at the 75
Right.
percentile or 90, you might have a better chance of keeping those individuals. But
Mm-hmm.
when they are able to go and find a position or whatever, be told this is what we're going to offer you, and then provide that back, and it doesn't reflect what maybe we're sitting at in a company, it's a better argument with those making the decisions on pay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't work in nonprofit. It doesn't work all over the place.
Right.
But it's very common in, engineering, contracting work.
Mm-hmm.
That is very much an easy thing. It's unfortunate because there may be times that you still lose the individual, and that's okay.
Right.
And I always tell employees, as individuals leave, I tell CEOs and presidents, as they leave, you want to support them.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be upset that they're leaving. Yeah, it's going to harm you in some way, but you rather them be a boomerang employee, so that if something happens in that new position, if the salary doesn't work, if they get let go because of downsizing or whatever that looks like, they want to come back to you.
Yeah.
And when they come back, you can do as best you can to get them at that higher salary or what closer to what they're asking for, or whatever that looks like. And so there's always that balance in there. But I know there's a lot of stigma in the HR world and not even just HR world, but in general of, well, if I'm already going to go look and interview and get a job offer, why would I come back for, a renegotiation with you.
Right.
Totally valid.
Mm-hmm.
But from my perspective, it has helped a lot of companies and CEOs to say, okay, yeah, we're wrong. Now we need to also reevaluate across the company in this work role, on this team, whatever that looks like. And it helps, again, from my perspective in HR to say, oh yeah, this is a thing that I'll go to bat for.
Yeah.
What I also find is when that occurs, when that conversation happens, because of pay transparency, again, great initiatives, not done always the best way. When those
Right.
ads or those ranges are so big,
Mm-hmm.
employees, unfortunately, if you have 3 years or if you have 4 years, they come back and see, oh, I'm actually at that lower rate
Mm-hmm.
on a range. And I may be close, or I may be paid more than what I'm being offered. So maybe it's not as bad when
Right.
it comes to true money being the reason. At the end of the day, I think a lot of times there's still a foundation, and studies do show that within 6 months, individuals will still leave, even if you give them a raise.
Yeah. And that ultimately just goes back to what you were saying of communication is important.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
with all of the information that's provided in like the job application process and who you're hiring and what type of team is made up of the company, obviously, HR has been in the news frequently in the early part of this year. And you probably assumed this question was coming, but DEI has been a huge initiative that was put on by HR and now is being recalled almost, for lack of a better word. And what are the thoughts on that? How is that really going to affect companies?
Well, it's such a hot topic, right? And I think the hard part is for a while. I think a lot of companies, CEOs use it as like the hot word of the day, right?
Yeah.
What is being talked about? How do we talk about it on our side and just do it, not from an HR but a company perspective? How do we just say we're doing it versus actually dedicating time to it and putting efforts in? What I think is really important is how our companies who have been doing it well have been doing it for far longer than 2019, 2018,
Right.
2017, right? And so I think companies that put it in place, whether long ago or in 2019 and a couple years back, who are still doing it because it's been baked into who they are as what their values are. And so I think it's a weird place because especially if you're a government contractor or if you work in the government, your hands are tied. You kind of have to pull a lot of that information or what efforts were in there out to meet the essentially expectations that are put onto you. When it comes to completely private or completely corporate, not government connected businesses, I think that it goes back to, are we going, as a CEO, as owners, are we going to get in trouble with our employees? But if that's the mindset, then it wasn't what you were trying to build your company on in the first place.
Right.
And so oftentimes employees can see that as a tell-all. Like, they can see it's not baked into who they are. It's not what they want to stand on. Even when you say, oh, we have DEI initiatives.
Yeah.
One thing I always tell people to do in interviews is not ask how do you define your culture, or not ask like, what are your DEIs, or do you have ERGs or anything like that, but what are the values that you, as the whoever's interviewing you and as the company, you stand on, and how do you see those values being portrayed through the position that you're interviewing for?
Yeah.
And so having that slight change makes people more aware of where the company wants to sit. And I think the other thing is, regardless, every place is going to have, or there's always a potential of, this is what we say in the interview, and it's very different when you get in there.
Right.
That's going to happen.
The classic bait and switch.
Yes. But it's a matter of how people are answering those questions, because a lot of times you can see a stumble. And being, if there's a, oh, we have to think of, there's a pause, a think through how they want to approach it. It's either not ingrained to that level with who they're interviewing with, or it's not something that individuals can say they can stand on. And so with that, from my perspective, HR holds a lot of weight in that culture, in that DEI realm. But I go back to, it's not on HR. It is on your entire company.
Yeah.
And so if that means every single time that you have an all hands, or every time you are redoing your handbook or whatever that looks like, you're reevaluating and reiterating to your company, this is what we stand on. This is what we believe in. And so it starts to fully be ingrained in your employees, and they are able to naturally have that built into them. It does not take away the biases and the differences that individuals have. But I think about, it's important about holding space for both. And that's one thing in HR is really important, is that you're there for everybody. And so the person that's walking in may not agree with you politically. They may not agree with your lifestyle. They may not agree with just the person that you're married to, kind of thing. But when it comes to that, it is a matter of, what is the company willing to stand on? Is the company going to say, this is unacceptable? And what does that level look like? What does that discipline, unfortunately, but the discipline side look like? When those things are presented, is it a, slide it under the rug situation? Or is it a, no, we're going to confront this head on, and this is a really important situation for our whoever's in charge, whatever level of leadership is. I think that's one of the things that is really important, that, DEI, you can change the name 1,000 times. It has been there. It is the foundation of so many things, and it truly is not new within the last 10 years. But it became a hot topic, and people didn't want to be perceived, or companies didn't want to be perceived in a negative light. But they did it in a way that they just threw it on there, or they're unwilling to continue to stand on it.
Yeah. And so when you talk about sweeping stuff under the rug, obviously HR is involved in a lot of, I want to say gatekeeping, but also a lot of sweeping some stuff under the rug and trying to make everything be perceived in a certain manner. What is like the worst thing that you've ever seen just swept under the rug of like, oh, no one look at that?
Yeah. It's hard. There's so many things that I can say, like, oh, we shouldn't have done that. And I think the hard part is that, like, the idea is like, it's HR's fault, but 9 times out of 10, at least in my experience, HR's the ones going to bat, saying,
you're the messenger.
Hey, we need to talk about this. We need to confront it. I think for me, one of the most awkward situations, or the most we're just gonna slide this under and not talk about it. Years ago, I was in a situation where disciplinary had to occur. And there was a lot, the team that I took care of, there was a lot of family dynamics in it. Big perspective, big company, government wise, right? But the department was still fairly large, but a lot of families, right? It was just common. The government's so big, it's not uncommon for, generations of families to be involved. But in that particular organization, it was well known that somebody in charge was somebody else's father. And the individual, unfortunately, decided to leave an area that they shouldn't have left, to go engage in some extracurricular activities that involved others in the company or in the department as well, in the bathroom. And simply, to simply put it, it was quite literally swept away. And the worst part, I think, for me was everybody knew in the organization. Everybody knew what was happening. Everybody knew. I mean, when those two ended up getting married, there were a ton of people within the company.
The ceremony was held in the bathroom.
Right. But they all went, right? And that's okay. That was fine. But everybody knew it was what was happening happened on time, like on duty. They
Yeah.
left where they were supposed to be, keeping watch of what was happening, and ultimately caused some security risks. And instead of
Mm-hmm.
disciplining in the manner of like, hey, you're going to be suspended maybe for a couple days or whatever the action should have been, it
Yeah.
simply was, oh, okay, we're just going to move them into different offices.
Mm.
And so everybody knew that was happening because
Mm-hmm.
of one of the individuals was related to the highest within that organization. And
Yeah.
so it became this dynamic of, well, if they can do it, why
Oh
are you
no.
yelling at me about my texting or whatever it was?
Yeah.
And it was a matter of, hey, I get it. I also can't sit here and tell you I fully agree with what you're saying, but I can tell you that I understand where
Yeah.
you're coming from, and let's re-engage on how this also goes against a different policy and not
Yeah.
not in that manner. I think that's the hardest part, especially when people talk, and that's the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think to the Coldplay CEO, our individual from the past weekend or the past week, I go back to that. People knew, right?
Mm.
There are people who were aware to some extent. They may not have
Mm-hmm.
known the full extent of what was happening, but it's impossible not to know that there was something happening, whether
Mm-hmm.
it was that they knew that an actual affair was occurring or that there was just a different level of, power dynamics there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the realest and the hardest part is when you sweep those things or when you just kind of ignore it, you're thinking you're ignoring it because nobody's going to be aware, but that's not the reality. People are aware, they're just not letting you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is really, that speaks volumes, that screams volumes of everybody is aware.
Yeah.
You kind of just look like the silly person of thinking that nobody knows.
Yes. And I think that, I don't want to say like all CEOs are naive to this, but everyone's actions are watched, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that is the reality from the very top to your like your newest employee. People
Mm-hmm.
are watching. And that is
Yeah.
good that people are watching. I don't, I wouldn't want anyone to ever get in trouble. That's not why I'm in HR, right? Like, I don't want
Yeah.
to have to discipline. That's one of the worst things that I ever have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But to think that nobody's watching, even just a
Mm-hmm.
conversation, not hearing, that's not real. That's not,
Yeah.
that's very naive. And that goes for every level of a company.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously, like, there's a lot of pitfalls and uncomfortable situations, like times where you have to terminate someone or
Yep.
times where you have to discipline them for sneaking off
Yeah.
into the bathroom. But yeah, there's obviously like something that has driven you to even create your own firm. And what would you say that that is? It's like, what is your most gratifying moments in HR?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is knowing at the root of all that I do is it's for those people that I'm working with. And
Mm-hmm.
so from being an employee in HR and working with other employees, I am always reminded every single day what I do is for the people, like the people are what's paying me. That's
Mm-hmm.
the reality. And what I am
Yeah.
doing is here to truly have that helpfulness for them and the
Mm-hmm.
company because I don't think anyone, I would hope no CEO goes into it. I'm only in this to cause harm. There are definitely CEOs that are like, nope, I'm in it for the money. But the other side of that is knowing that there's a person who knows when, Sally's daughter's getting married and we send
Mm-hmm.
them something, just those little moments of,
Yeah.
my kid's sick and I have to be home, but you're going to take care of, a meal for us because I've got two other kids and it's hard to balance what's happening. And
Mm-hmm.
just having those small gratifications of not everyone's going to know what's going on for everyone. It is
Right.
not realistic, especially as companies grow, that the CEO is going to know every single detail. But when there is somebody, and for me, it is me, I put myself in that position to take on knowing what's happening so that we can continue to take care of those individuals. And it
Mm-hmm.
extends further than just them, right? We want to
Mm-hmm.
make it known. And I hate the cliche of we're all family. I
Oh,
cannot
yeah.
stand a company saying that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, we are all a team and we are
Mm-hmm.
all working to meet the company's goals.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who are there for you as an employee are also your family members. And they are
Mm-hmm.
doing something that our companies never realize, right? They're there
Mm-hmm.
to support you when you're working late. And so
Mm-hmm.
if we can also take care of them in some
Mm-hmm.
manner, and having those, hey, like, thanks for remembering it's my birthday, or it's my
Yeah.
anniversary, or my kid's getting, graduating. Those little things make a huge difference. And so on the
Mm-hmm.
flip side, when it's on my consulting side, my biggest thing is, again, I'm not the one making the final decisions. I'm
Mm-hmm.
giving you my advice. And so
Yeah.
being able to set somebody up to have those same moments when you have processes and things being built out, it's a lot. And it can be a
Mm-hmm.
lot, especially if you're a team of 1, 2, or 3. But being able to build those processes and take the recommendations and making sure you're never gonna, not never, but having those
Yeah.
moments of, like, I'm doing this to make sure that we don't get in a situation where the company has to close because we've had a lawsuit and it bankrupts us.
Mm-hmm.
Those little things are so gratifying for me that I want companies to see it that way too.
Yeah.
Because again, it goes back to the people, and the people are what everything is a foundation on, and they're
Mm-hmm.
human. And I think
Yeah.
that is so often forgotten, especially as companies grow, is everybody is still human. They have
Mm-hmm.
emotions, and it's about how we take care of everybody in the best way for their needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like that is becoming more and more glaringly obvious with the growth of AI, of people are not just replaceable one for one. Like it is not a like for like replacement in terms of number one, HR. Like I have seen people like one of my friends just got interviewed and was with AI and he was like, that is the weirdest interview I've ever had in my entire life. Or you'll see horror stories on LinkedIn of people getting a rejection letter, and it's like, Dear fill in applicant's name. Sorry, you've been rejected from enter position here. And we let down, and then it gives the prompt of,
Yes.
please let down applicant gently but firmly about not receiving
Mm-hmm.
the role and make it not specific so that it doesn't fit to just one. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yes. And it's the unfortunate reality, as I think oftentimes, and one of the biggest things that recently happened with me was AI is that go-to, right? And
Mm-hmm.
everyone's saying it's the new thing. AI is going to replace everybody. And there was an article recently, and I wish I remembered what company it was, but they said that they were letting go of all of their HR, and AI was replacing them. And one of the employees at my full-time job reached out and said, hey, did you see this article? And I said, yeah, I read it. It's unfortunate. And he
Yeah.
goes, yeah, well, no one's going to replace you. There's no way AI can replace you.
Well,
And
that's
in
sweet.
that moment, it was, oh, this individual who I have thought may never like me and my
Yeah.
entire time here actually cares for what I'm saying and doing, and sees
Yeah.
the bigger perspective, and how to say well enough to say, hey, AI can't replace you. And
Yeah.
I think it always goes back to, how do you connect? How are you willing to connect? Is
Mm-hmm.
so important, because AI is not going to connect with you.
No, no. And no, as a personality hire, speaking from experience, like there is no way. There is just no particular way that that is happening. Like,
No.
not something I foresee. Sorry, guys.
Right.
Yeah, so not something that I think anybody should necessarily be too concerned at. I think that we've come to realize that AI isn't necessarily gunning for the jobs that we at least are performing in terms of
Right.
in a human aspect, because I mean we are human. But yeah, I think that for sure there are some other jobs that might be a little bit more autonomous, or less autonomous, I should say, and more automated. of just
Yeah.
this is a very rigid function that you have to do over and over again. Sure, those jobs might be at stake, but I think that that only implies more incentive for people to just sharpen up on their soft skills. Like for so long, it has been preached to us that we need to get our hard skills in. You need to know how to code. You need to know how to
Yes.
be able to do X, Y, and Z. And now all of the sudden that's being turned on its head. And it's like, hey, actually, you need to learn how to talk to somebody. Okay.
Yes. Yep, fully. And I think that's the other side, right? Like every position can use AI to help them, right? That's not that's the truth. Is there's I mean, even me, I can use AI and say, okay, like how's this going to help me and help get all of the mess that's in my head out onto something that's logical for employees. But it's not going to be the end all be all. And I definitely think
Right.
it's interesting because AI definitely has its own biases. And it's funny that we say that now, but AI
Yeah.
is built off of what is put into the
It's
internet.
source code.
And so
Yeah.
right. And so people are putting their own biases in it. And I think it was ChatGPT. I think it was ChatGPT that they said initially, in particular, was very biased on how they would talk about people. And I was like, this should just show you in and of itself, you're never gonna be able to get rid of
Yeah.
people in their jobs. It's not
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Well, Katie, I'm sure I could talk to you for hours about HR, which is something that I didn't ever think that I would be able to talk in such depth and have so many questions about. But you're definitely a wealth of knowledge, and so anybody would be privileged to work with you. But if you'd like to share, please let people know where to find you and how to reach you.
Yeah, so KG People Consulting. It's same as my website, same as my Instagram. And if you want to get a hold of me directly, it's Katie at kgpeopleconsulting.com.
So I really appreciate you still getting on and willing to chat with me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it and had a great time. Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Have a
Thank
good
you
one.
so much for
Bye.
listening to
Bye.
another episode of the Consider the Source podcast. If you're not already, please make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure to check us out on YouTube because the videos do get posted there every Wednesday. And then if you haven't already, make sure you leave a comment. Make sure you leave a 5-star review. Make sure that you're following me on social media at Sarah Smiles Network everywhere. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, and make sure to tune in next week for another episode of the Consider the Source podcast. Bye.